Hello everyone, I'm Kyle Turner for NEC Front Row, here talking women's basketball on NEC On The Run. We're here with Ralph Ventre, the NEC's Women's Basketball Public Relations Director. Ralph, what are some headlines you have for us early in the season?
Well, Kyle, the natural place to start is the race for the Northeast Conference crown, or the race for first, as we should say, the race for that number one seed in the NEC tournament. As you know, we tipped off conference play just a week ago. The new year always brings with it a new conference schedule. And the standings so far, there are two teams at the top. They're both 2-0, Bryant and Central Connecticut. They were both picked in the bottom half of the NEC preseason coaches poll, but that hasn't stopped them from getting a fast start out of the gate. Bryant and Central 2-0, the only two teams unbeaten right now in NEC play.
Well, as you said, Ralph, two teams unbeaten, Bryant and Central Connecticut, they're both 2-0. But why are they 2-0? Why are they undefeated at this point?
Well, let's start with Bryant, and we'll talk about what I like to call Bailey squared. It's Janiqua Bailey, a senior guard, the NEC's assist leader last year. She's at the top of the leaderboard, or near the top of the leaderboard again this season. And then Ivory Bailey, a freshman guard. And since she stepped on campus in Smithfield, she has provided a nice spark in the scoring department and really helping out the Bulldogs there. And one other thing with the Bulldogs has been their ability to continue to dominate on the glass. They lead the NEC in rebounding margin, but why I'm so fascinated by this is because they lost Nana and Coma Mensa to graduation last year. And we all know Nana is the one of the top rebounders in the history of the Northeast Conference. So you lose a force like that, but yet you're still good at cleaning up the glass. So there you go, rebounding, and the two Baileys are three reasons why Bryant's 2-0. Quickly, we'll look at Central. Central, I want to tell you right now, Burl Piper has a lot to do with this here. She's a veteran coach. She knows the league. She knows the personnel around the league. She knows how to win in this league and to get the most out of her players. Central, if you look at the two league games they did win, in both of those league games, they out-rebounded their opponent, and they also had more assists than turnovers in each of those two games. Right there, rebounding, assist, more than turnovers, winning combination.
So it's still early in conference play. Central 2-0, Bryant 2-0. It's always good to get wins early in the conference season. Ralph, let's look at some key players so far in this conference play. Who stands out to you as some possible All-America candidates?
Well, we're about midway through the regular season overall, only 2 games into the Northeast Conference season, as you mentioned. But if I had to pick a pair of players who could be possible All-America candidates here in the Northeast Conference, I'd have to go with Jasmine Nawaje of Wagner and St. Francis U's Alexa Hayward. They're 2 guards, 2 sensational scorers. Actually, both are ranked amongst the top 10 in America in terms of scoring average. You have Hayward, a shade under 23 points per game. I believe she's 6th overall on the Division I leaderboard. And then Nawaje, 22.6 points per game, is in 10th. So 2 phenomenal scorers. They've done it against great competition, and we've seen them do it in the past. We saw both of these players perform at a high level last year. Nawaje was the Rookie of the Year in the conference, Wagner's leading scorer. Hayward had 43 in an NEC tournament game last year. So we've seen them do it last year, but what's made this so special is they've taken another step forward. Their game has stepped up this year, and they're even better, more dynamic, and more dangerous than they were a year ago. So 2 of the most explosive scorers in the country right here in the Northeast Conference, Hayward, Nawaje, they're my top 2 right now, but still 16 games to play, Kyle.
All right, so we hit on the standings. We got a couple of primetime performers in there. Now let's look ahead to the race, particularly at the 2 teams that were in the championship last year, Robert Morris and St. Francis U. Ralph, what can you tell us about that?
Well, those 2 teams you mentioned, they're a little bit of a work in progress to start the season because they lost 2 all-time greats. Of course, St. Francis U had Allie Williams, a 2,000-point scorer, a 1,000 rebounder, and of course, Artemis Spanu for Robert Morris. She was a 2,000-point scorer and the NEC's all-time leading rebounder. 2 of the best players this league has ever seen. They squared off in last year's championship game, and now they've graduated, and now their teams have to learn how to play and then how to win without them. Because when the game got late, when it came down to crunch time last year, Robert Morris knew they were going to give the ball to Spanu, and she was going to create. She was either going to draw the double team, kick out for an open shot, or she was going to get that ball in the hoop herself. Now, you don't have Artemis to go to, so you have to find your other go-to players. You may have to adapt your style a little bit. Same thing with SFU. They lost Allie Williams. Now, Lexa Hayward goes from being a sidekick to Allie Williams to now she's the focal point of that offense. So that takes a little of adjustment on Hayward, and also the Red Flash are young, so those players in general are trying to find their identity as a team. So those 2 teams who were in the championship game last year, they could be back this year very much, but we're going to have to see a little bit of a transformation from them as conference play continues along. And as far as the race goes, this all leads back to the Lisa Sermignano quote here. The Wagner head coach pointed out that the race in the NEC is wide open, and one of the big reasons why is because Spanu and Williams have graduated. And I think Sermignano is right on. There's no question in my mind that Robert Morris and SFU, who have been 2 of the perennial powers in this league for some years, maybe a team like Wagner, which hasn't won the title in nearly 25 years, can come up and steal that title, because it really is a wide open race in 2015.
All right, so we talked about primetime performers, we talked about the standings, we talked about the race. How about we take a timeout here? We're going to take a Twitter timeout. Ralph, give me a tweet.
It's coming from Craig D'Amico. Craig, of course, play-by-play man for NEC Women's Hoops. He'll be on the air this weekend, ESPN 3, and that LIU Wagner game. I think we'll hit on that a little bit later in the show. But Craig tweets this, and he's right on. Jasmine Nawaje, we mentioned her earlier, a prospective All-American as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, Craig's impressed with her as well, as you can see. How can you not be? He mentions in her last 4 that she has that scoring average, but her last 4 contains the first 2 conference games. If you really want to get blown away, folks, go look at her last 4 performances in non-conference play. She dropped a 40 spot on Columbia. She had a 28 in there. She had another 30-point game. I mean, she has been on fire since Christmas time. So obviously, Craig makes the astute observation, but this one is kind of obvious.
All right, we're going to come out of the timeout now, and we're going to take a look at some numbers around the league. Ralph, what are some numbers that stand out to you?
Well, for this show, for this week, we're going to look at one number, and that's 1,000, a grand. 1,000. And that's because 4 Northeast Conference players recently reached the 1,000-point plateau. FDU's Erica Livermore, junior center, she was the last to do it. And of course, Livermore, she's a great story for FDU. She missed all of last year for injury. She's returned this year, and she looks like she's back in all Northeast Conference form. Of course, as a sophomore, she was an all-NEC player, a double-double machine, and she's finding her way again at FDU. Sarah Benedetti, veteran guard for St. Francis. She hit 1,000 this year. Then you have Janiqua Bailey. We mentioned her earlier in the show. She's known for her passing, the assist leader in the Northeast Conference last year. I believe she's second this year, but she's at 1,000 points. And finally, the 4th player to hit 1,000 points is from Wagner. Not Jasmine Nawaje, but junior Jordan Peck. We haven't talked about her yet today, but she's been a sensational scorer since her freshman year. Halfway through her junior year, she's already at a grand, and with her and Nawaje in the backcourt, that's a pretty explosive pair of guards on Grimes Hill. So, needless to say, a grand is the number this week. 4 players have gotten it, and there's a possibility a few more may reach that milestone down the road here in 2015.
All right, NEC Hoops fans, we have games on Saturday. Here's the schedule. You can watch these games live on necfrontrow.com. Also, remember, iOS users, you can download the NEC On The Run app on your iPad and your iPhone. Ralph, when you look at the schedule on Saturday, are there any games that stand out to you?
Well, every conference game is always going to be a battle. I know it's a cliche, but it's usually true. The one that I'm going to look at, of course, is our featured game of the week. It's on ESPN3. You can also get the feed live on Front Row, but it will be on ESPN3. That's LIU, Brooklyn, and Wagner. It's in the Spiro Center on Staten Island, so LIU will come down. They'll make that short trip over to Verrazano Bridge. Only a few miles. Who knows how many hours it'll take them to get over to Verrazano. But they'll come down, and these are 2 teams that know each other well. They're only a few miles apart. They both have great guard play. LIU, Sophie Bassine. Of course, we've talked about the Wagner guards ad nauseum here. So that's one to look out for. If you like good guard play, LIU, Wagner on ESPN3. And obviously, you can get the feed on Front Row.
All right, that's all we have for this edition of NEC On The Run Women's Basketball. For Ralph Ventre, I'm Kyle Turner with NEC Front Row, and we'll see you next week.